Welcome to another edition of Anglican Unscripted. This is episode 917. I'm Kevin Kallsen.
And this is David Pileggi.
And you're watching a special edition of Anglican Unscripted. All right, I want to welcome David back to the program. Last time I had you on was October 2nd of last year, when we're coming up on the anniversary of the October 7th attacks that occurred in Israel by Hamas the previous year. It's time to get a quick update because a lot has happened. We had some time where some hostages were released. There was a time of a truce, a hard truce, and kind of an update of what's happened since then. The truce fell apart and the hostage negotiations have stopped. What has happened recently?
Well, basically, we're at an impasse. There was a truce or a ceasefire up until March the 2nd, and the Israeli government decided to break that ceasefire in order to try to achieve its ultimate war goal, which is the military defeat of Hamas. And it has sidelined or made secondary the release of the hostages, and so the war has continued since March the 2nd, and again, the aims of the war is to try to root out and destroy Hamas, and at the moment, Israel is trying to seek out and to kill Hamas operatives, military operatives, and those who work for the Hamas civilian administration. Unfortunately, many of these operatives are living in tents with their family in so-called safe zones, and while a number of important or semi-important Palestinian operatives are being killed, also a lot of Palestinian civilians are being killed or being injured. And the world has pushed back quite strongly against Israel. Up until March the 2nd, Israel had quite a bit of quiet international support from Europe, the United States, and the Arab world. And now it's getting a lot of public criticism during this phase of the war. And I should say that probably 70% of the Israeli public also wants the war to come to an end, and they want the hostages released. And this present government thinks otherwise. So this is where we stand at the moment. There are, I should say, negotiations going on between Israel and Hamas through the United States, but they certainly cannot see eye to eye. Israel wants a truce with the possibility of continuing the war. Hamas wants a truce with the war finally coming to an end and allowing the international community to rebuild Gaza. So we're at a stalemate at the moment.
Well, you are, because in order to clear Gaza of Hamas and terrorist influencers, you have to go street by street, building by building, and displace all the citizens to a different location.
That's correct. And the question is whether morally, ethically, politically, and even militarily, is it worth the price to do this? And there are some military experts, and obviously those in power in the government, who believe that destroying Hamas is absolutely the best policy, because once Hamas is destroyed militarily, they won't be able to reassemble, to come back to attack Israel again, and this might actually be the very best for not only for Israel but ultimately for the Palestinians. There are those, on the other hand, including many in the military itself, who say that it's probably impossible to totally defeat Hamas, and it's better to bring the war to an end and to try to cripple it through diplomatic means and with the aid and support of the international community. So that's the debate that's raging, or that's going on in Israel. It's made complicated by the fact that many Israelis believe that the prime minister is keeping the war going, not only for military and strategic reasons, also for personal political reasons. However, whether that's true or not, there's certainly a lobby, a vocal but small lobby in Israel of parents who've lost sons and daughters in the war, and they want to see the war come to some conclusion in which they can claim victory. They don't want their sons or daughters to have died in vain. At least that's what they're saying. So internally, it's quite complicated, as well as internationally.
Well, internationally, funny you mentioned that. More and more here in America, we're having anti-Semitic attacks, terror attacks. We've lost a governor's mansion. We had 2 employees of the Israel consulate were killed here in Washington, D.C. Yesterday we had a firebombing attack at a pro-Israel rally in Colorado. And certainly this is not the first time we've had this on the shores here in America. But what happens in Israel is not isolated to Israel. It affects every nation. Because everyone wants to take a side. Right.
Absolutely. This is, of course, unleashed a wave of anti-Semitism. Naturally, I think all of us realize that anti-Semitism is latent, just below the surface. It can be found in churches and in civic organizations, and political parties. And at certain times in history, it tends to explode. It comes in waves. This wave has been quite vociferous and quite dangerous for the Jewish people internationally. And as much as we should have and could have expected an anti-Semitism coming out of the Gaza war, it actually has been quite shocking and bigger than I think anyone imagined. So it is certainly a very serious development, because I think anti-Semitism, certainly at least the way we're seeing it expressed in many countries in the world, including the U.S., anti-Semitism doesn't just hurt the Jewish people. It actually eats away at the foundations of democratic life, and it's especially dangerous for the church itself. So for our own sake, I think it certainly needs to be either repressed or dealt with, firmly, and really in the most public manners possible.
Now, it is my belief that it's not anti-Semitic to criticize the military strategy of Israel, or to
absolutely it is not anti-Semitic to criticize the state of Israel or the policies of the state of Israel. It's another thing to say from the river to the sea, because if you're saying from the river to the sea, you're saying, well, let's just dismantle, or let's just destroy the state of Israel. And basically what you're saying, what people are basically saying, is that the Jews are not an ethnic group, and therefore they have no right to a nation. And the history of anti-Semitism, Kevin, has been such that throughout much of at least recent history, medieval history, even going back to the time before Jesus, anti-Semitism was basically a critique, an unfair and almost a distorted critique of Judaism, Judaism itself. And basically, over the centuries, we criticized Judaism, tore Judaism apart because we didn't like this religious value or this aspect, or called it a false religion, associated the Jews and their religion with the devil. And now, right, that doesn't happen as much. But what happens is we, instead of attacking individual Jews, at least this was the case until recently, the object of hatred and anti-Semitism has become the whole state of Israel. So we not only delegitimize Judaism, now we're delegitimizing a state. And what's so critical about that is that the way Jews understand themselves, and I think the way the Bible understands the Jewish people, is that on one hand, they're a religion because God has given them a Torah, a book, a religious law, right? A covenant. And on the other hand, they're an ethnic group, right? Because the promise God makes to Abraham that continues throughout the Hebrew Bible is that the Jews are also given a land, right? So having a land and a covenant makes them on one hand, not a race, but it makes them a people, an ethnic group, and it makes them a religious group. And anti-Semitism today is attacking both of those pillars, or those foundations, right, of Jewish self-understanding.
Mm-hmm. Now, therein lies the paradox. When Israel fell and the Jews dispersed throughout Europe and other lands, they were told to go home. Go back to Israel. Leave us alone. Go back to Jerusalem. Right. And they do. Was not good enough. We just want you to disappear.
100 years ago, places throughout Europe, it said anti-Semites wrote on the walls of European cities, Jews to Palestine.
Yeah.
And today it's Jews out of Palestine, right? So that's the paradox.
Yeah.
And certainly that is the dilemma, that we're facing. And so much of what we call anti-Semitism, and I have to be very careful because I don't want to characterize this in a very black and white way, but much of what people call, not anti-Semitism, but what people call support for the Palestinians, or this tagline, "Oh, I'm pro-Palestinian," is oftentimes a thin disguise for anti-Semitism. And I would like to just explain why. I think I've mentioned this before, but it's worth repeating. The people who are so avid, about Palestinian rights, if you ask these folks, do you know any Arabic? Of course, most are going to say no. Do you know anything really seriously about Palestinian life? Who's their favorite singer, right? Tell me about the different kinds of Palestinian food besides hummus and tahina and pita. Do you know anything about the differences, cultural differences, linguistic differences, yes, between Palestinians who might live in Gaza and others who live in Nablus? Oh, and why aren't you so concerned? Where is your outrage about the way Palestinians are being treated in Lebanon or Syria? And why are you only enraged about what happens to them in Israel, right? So there are people who have a genuine empathy and love for the Palestinians, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate their honesty And I even welcome, people to have that kind of love and kind of support for the Palestinian people. But just to join a bandwagon and to bash Israel, I don't find that very honest, and I don't find it very helpful, right? And nobody's helping to or doing anything positive to solve the problem here. And
Well,
if you don't, yeah, like you say, that there are conservatives who support Israel, who really don't care about Israel or the Jewish people, but they just think Israel is bashing the Muslims, and that's good enough for them.
Yeah.
But if you ask them about Israeli life, Jewish life, what they know about Hebrew, the Jewishness of Jesus, well, they don't know very much, but they like the fact that, Israel's at war with all these, or has been at war with all these Muslim countries, for example.
Well, I think the news media, the internet, and the people who get their news from the internet only have a 24-hour memory. They're like, well, why don't we have a two-state solution? Tried that. We've proposed, done that. Why don't we do this? We have tried all these solutions for the last 20, right. 30, 35, 40 years, and it's just not allowed. It just does not work. And the biggest thing that's not working here is defeating Hamas. When we defeated Adolf Hitler and the Germans, once we took out the head, Adolf Hitler, the country fell. There was a surrender. When we took out Japan, the leadership decided that it was not worth the cost, and they surrendered. Hamas says there's no way that this is not worth the cost of every human civilian of Gaza is worth this.
Right. Yes, it is true. Hamas has used the people of Gaza, in a sense, as human shields. Mm-hmm. They've manipulated food supplies, and worse. And at the same time, the Israeli military has been less than cautious. And that is in part not always because of military policy. But as we were talking before the show, what October the 7th did in Israel was to unleash a rage that I've never seen before, which was taken, you might say, by the army into the Gaza Strip, and in some quarters, rage turned to revenge. And when the military commanders tried to remind troops of not only of their duty, but of the necessity to follow orders and to obey international law, those same military commanders didn't have a lot of credibility, because most of the rank and file troops held them responsible for what happened on October the 7th. Mm-hmm. So, these are some internal problems within Israel, and I have no question that Israel needs to defeat Hamas. The issue is how Israel goes about defeating Hamas, and at what price. So things aren't always black and white, and we have to sometimes live with some gray areas or some nuance that should inform our prayer life in the way that we, advocate, for different causes or countries here in the Middle East.
So in about 4 months, it'll be 2 years. What do you think, after 2 years of war, the citizens of Israel would be willing to live with? Would they be willing to live with an armed Hamas next door? Or what do you think they would settle for?
I think most people in Israel they want to bring the hostages home first and foremost. Mm-hmm. And the reason being is that the lack of a government priority, right, to free the remaining hostages or the living hostages, and there might be 25 or so still alive, mm-hmm. is fracturing solidarity in Israel. One of Israel's great strengths, right, is the strong solidarity that, or the bond of solidarity that it has virtually in all sectors of society. People know we're living in a war zone. We have to pull together. We have to support each other. We have to give the government as much support as possible. But in return, right, we are a Jewish state, and the Jewish state is here to protect and preserve Jewish life. And when that state is failing and the contract that it has with its citizens, it's leading to a huge amount of disillusionment, disappointment, anger, and the like. On top of that, you have soldiers, and I include there are those even in our parish, who have done months and months and months of reserve duty, sometimes in the most dangerous of places, under the most dangerous circumstances. And people here are exhausted, and families are fractured, and businesses have closed, and people are worried about their future. And so there's an exhaustion, that's settled all throughout the country. And again, this disillusionment with the government refusal, you might say, to prioritize the release of the hostages. And so I think Israel most people would probably live with a defeated, crippled Hamas, and with the provision that should Hamas ever become a serious threat again, that the army wouldn't hesitate to take action. It wouldn't wait for Hamas to start something like they did in the past. So I think that's the public mood. Is that the best policy? I can't tell you.
Yeah, I don't see how you can go. You are at least in the position where you're going to have to occupy the Gaza Strip for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Which you've done before.
That's what I think a lot of people don't want to do.
Yeah.
Simply because they do not want the Gaza Strip to become South Lebanon. Meaning you have a large number of soldiers there, and you have Hamas guys popping out of tunnels, shooting soldiers, and in the end, you withdraw anyway. In the end, and one of the issues that has kind of created this whole mess with food distribution is that the army doesn't want its soldiers involved in giving out food to the residents of Gaza, because they don't want to take casualties. Right? Taking casualties in Israel is quite sensitive, and so it's important that international aid organizations do this. So I don't know if there's going to be the reoccupation of Gaza. Personally, I hope not. And I speak as someone who would have parishioners and friends and know a lot of Christians, or a fair amount of Christians or Messianic Jews, who would be doing army duty in those places. And I also want to speak on behalf of some of the Muslim background believers that we at Christ Church nurture and help in the Gaza Strip. And so for their sake, I hope that doesn't happen. But you're right, that might be the end game in all of this. We'll see.
All right, I mentioned before we had some terrorism here on the shores here in America. In a small world, you actually know the father of the man who was killed here in Washington, D.C.
Yes, I knew Yaron Lisinski.
Yeah.
My goodness. Yaron Lisinski was the son of Danny Lisinski, who's a Messianic Jew from Argentina. And before that, his family came from the Ukraine. He Danny worked for us for a number of years. He is the salt of the earth and the sweetest man possible. And Danny had a family, has 5 children, 4 boys and 1 girl. And Yaron was their second son. Yaron used to come to Christchurch on occasion. He actually liked the Anglican liturgy and liked our long 47-point sermons. And we were close, somewhat close to the family. And we were, of course, shocked when we found out what happened. Yaron actually, I think he liked Christchurch so much, he went to Washington, D.C. and looked for an Anglican church. And probably not knowing the difference, went to an Episcopal church. But that was where he was fellowshipping at the time of his murder. So.
Yeah. All right.
And the man, isn't it ironic? The man who murdered those 2 wanted to kill a Jew. He ended up killing a Jewish Christian who was attending a conference on ways to better help the people of the Gaza Strip.
Yeah.
Isn't that a sick irony? It's worse than sad.
It is worse than sad. Well, when you hit worse than sad, you've arrived at evil. Yeah. And it is tremendously evil. You made news. I was reading Anglican Inc. The other day, and there's your face. You're in front of a forum discussing local Jewish conflict that Christians are involved in. Let's talk a little bit about that.
You mean I wasn't?
You weren't in jail.
I'm kind of worried because I'm using up my 15 minutes of fame, and I was hoping not to use it all up in the Anglican world. I was hoping to conquer the universes, but apparently that's not going to happen. Yes, I was invited to speak in front of the Knesset, along with the Roman Catholics and the Armenians, and we were speaking on harassment of Christians in Jerusalem by a growing number of usually young extremists. And we have been trying to bring this to the attention of the government for some time. And it seems now that they are about to act, and to act quite forcefully. And yes, I was able to put things to the minister and to other committee members that in a way was practical and perhaps utilitarian, but in a way that the Israelis understand. Israelis tend to be very, very practical, very concrete. And I appealed, for a new and better relationship between Israel and the churches, tried to remind them that we're not living in the 13th century anymore, and we're not your enemies, and further reminded them that while they're spending millions of shekels on what in Hebrew is called hasbara. Hasbara is, you might say, media PR. It has the sense of you're trying to explain your point of view, right? I would call it propaganda. This is how I see things, and I will want to share it with you. I suggested that they could save a lot of money by improving, relations with local churches. Because what happens to Christians here, even Jewish Christians, has quite a powerful impact, on Christian communities around the world. And Israel's been fairly good about religious freedom and respecting, the rights of Christians and pilgrims, but sometimes it takes a bit of a passive attitude and just lets things happen. And it was our appeal to be more active and to be more engaged. So yes, apparently it's a statement or a few statements of mine that went around the world. I haven't seen any cash out of it yet.
You know,
Uh,
there's no money in media in this at all.
well, that's what they say, Kevin. You,
Yeah.
you can't eat fame. Just send the cash, okay? So
Yeah, I've been made infamous by Anglican TV for 20 years, but it has come with no wages.
really,
Yeah, yeah.
there's something wrong with that. You need a financial advisor.
I,
You need someone to fix that for you.
yeah, I need a lotto, but it is what it is.
Okay.
And let's talk about the role of the Christians before a war in Jerusalem was to keep spreading the gospel. What is the war now? The role now of Christian churches in a time of war in Israel?
Well, let me just say just about the Christian churches in the Middle East in general.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think the role of churches has been, in many cases, preserving the holy sites, looking after dwindling Christian communities here in the Middle East. And for the most part, many churches have looked sort of inward, and they're trying to hold on to what they have. And what I have to say is somewhat sensitive, but unless there can be unless there will be in the next generation, pastors and priests, who may have the name of Muhammad and Walid, or someone who may have the name of Moshe, unless there's some kind of appreciation that we have to look outward, that we have to welcome and try to incorporate new members into the community, Christianity will be, in 20 years, 30 years, it'll be virtually gone here. The churches will remain and they will look after holy sites, but there will be very few, if any living communities. So I think that the first goal of the church is not only to look outward, and I don't suggest that people stand on the corner and hit people over the head with a Bible. That certainly doesn't work in Arab or Jewish culture. But many churches are definitely afraid to welcome new members, right, from outside, the Christian community. So I think we need to get over that fear. I think, secondly, we need to be able to offer hope to people in a very practical and tangible way. And I think, third, we have to be able to exhibit in a practical, concrete way, what does reconciliation look like? What does this vision or this one new man look like for Ephesians chapter 2? It said not the message of the gospel, that the gospel can overcome ethnic hatred and ethnic division, right? And enemies, in many cases, not in all cases, can become friends. There can become a certain unity, a certain love in an alternative community. And the church offers a clear alternative to the tribalism of the Middle East. So I think that's what we should be doing. Looking outward, showing, encouraging people, giving them hope. And it looks a little bit different for Arabs as it is for Jews. And we can support and love both and be empathetic to both at the same time. It doesn't always have to be black or white. I'm on this side, but I'm not going to look at my so-called enemies sympathetically. And finally, I think being an alternative model. And wasn't it Paul's contention, I would suggest, that the proof of the gospel is that it overcomes, right, ethnic division,
Hmm.
hatred, family strife, and, and throughout history, including the times in which we live, this is a huge, huge human need. So that's my prescription for what it's worth.
Now, on a personal level, there's an exhaustion to being a Christian, especially a minister in Israel in a time of war. You sound audibly a little bit tired. It can't be because you didn't sleep last night. You
I
know,
didn't I didn't sleep last night. No, it's been an exhausting time. Yes, there's not only worry or anxiety. Of course, everyone's worried about their families and worried about parishioners. But yes, the um, first COVID and then the war is certainly worn, I think, on us, and oftentimes pedaling as fast as you can within this context, and trying to overcome, either, all maybe the certain restrictions, or certain disabilities, that have been, yes, it has been somewhat exhausting. So I would say I'm in the same boat as a fair number of other people. So,
let's move on and talk a little bit about one of the national industries of Israel's tourism. Has there been any return to that industry?
no, uh, it picked up during Passover, the Easter season, but it's kind of fallen off again, and it didn't hurt. Sorry, it didn't help that many of the airlines canceled their flights because one missile from the Houthis uh, fell close to the
Tel
airport.
Aviv, yeah.
It was sort of a freak because the Israeli military didn't shoot it down, or somehow it missed. Uh, Almost all of those missiles get shot down well before they do any damage. But in this case, one missile fell close to the airport, and most major airlines decided to cancel their flights. So tourism started to dip again. I would suggest, if anyone is out there and they want to come to visit the Holy Land, that they should do so now, because it's not really crowded. And one can go to Capernaum and not meet 60 or 70 buses, there in the parking lot, and thousands of tourists, right, at these holy sites. So now's the perfect time to come as individuals, or even in small groups. So
Now, so CMJ is still up and running?
CMJ is, well, let's put it like this. So parish ministry continues.
Mm-hmm.
We're down in numbers because some students and even some of our members did not come back after October the 7th, or others have left, some for financial reasons. We have closed one of our guest houses are, you might say, operating on one cylinder. So most of them are closed. Our Mercy Fund, which is our efforts, yes, to bring blessing and support to the poor and those who are suffering because of the war. It's flourishing, and it's doing more than it's doing amazing things. So that part of the ministry is going quite well. We have Israeli visitors who come and want to talk to us, who are on spiritual journeys and want to know about the Lord. We also have a number of groups who come to hear the history of the church, Israeli groups. And so that ministry is going well. But I would say on the whole, we're only, I would say that we're partially. Some of, and of course, our tour ministry, Shorish, is also virtually shut down, although some tour groups are coming over to help Jewish and Arab charities, and we're sponsoring those groups. So we're down a bit, Kevin, but we're far from being knocked out here.
All right. Well, let's finish this up with this audience that watches Anglican TV is vast, largely Christian, and likes to pray for things. What could they pray for yourself, your church, and for Israel for? The prayers that need to be answered.
Well, Paul commands us in Timothy to pray for government officials, right? And to pray for those who make decisions. And in our day and age, we can pray for those who are influencers, right? Cultural influencers and digital influencers. And we pray for peace, an end to this war. And we can pray that what the devil meant for evil, God will turn for good. And for Christ Church, especially, I mean, if people would pray that for a continuing presence of the Lord in our worship and our acts of mercy or hospitality, teaching, preaching, everything else after that is secondary, right? So that it would be our first, really, my first and foremost priority, that we, have, God's power, His presence, His peace, and that we would be channels of that to bring blessing and encouragement to other people.
Amen. I want to thank you, David Pileggi, for being on the program again. It's
welcome. Thank you for having us, and thank you for listening to all these things. And may the Lord bless you and Anglican Unscripted, and may all the fame and success that's soon going to come to your way, George, as well. Don't let it go to your head and spoil you, Kevin.
Yeah. I want the money more than the fame. Not going to happen. It just
it's true. If you have a choice, take the cash.
Take the cash.
Small unmarked bills. Okay.
I pray. My prayer, David, is that the next time we talk, Israel is at peace.
Amen.
Amen.
Amen. And there's one more. There's the Gaza piece to get over, but there's the Iran piece, which is even bigger. And we really need to pray that Iran can be disarmed in such a way that it cannot produce a nuclear weapon, and this will happen peacefully.
Yes. Well, I want to give people hope in Iran as well. The Christian church in Iran is growing. And there's hope in that. And it's the leadership, but.
Yeah. There is hope. There is hope in that, but the mullahs are holding on to the nuclear option. They're not about to let go.
And they're not afraid to. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
God bless you, friend.